The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning if you happen to be on the West Coast, and welcome to today's webinar entitled An Introduction to SAP S/4HANA 2020. My name is Rihanna Thompson, and I'll be your moderator for today. And we have just a few announcements before we begin today's presentation. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenter. So if you have any questions during the broadcast, feel free to type them out into the chat. However, in the interest of time, we will try to answer the majority of your questions at the end during our Q&A session. But we encourage you all to type in as many questions as you can throughout the session. We hopefully will have time to get to everyone. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Lorraine Howe, Vice President of Innovation and Continuous Improvement at Illumity.
Thank you, Rihanna. Hi, everyone. It is nice to meet you all virtually on this webinar today. I hope that I can introduce you to S/4HANA 2020 in a way that will make sense to you. And I'm sure there will be lots of questions along the way. And probably if there are, we won't get to them all, but we will assuredly send email responses afterwards if we don't get to answering all the questions. What I did want to do to start off the presentation today was to look quickly at where you are or where your organization is currently in terms of adoption of SAP S/4HANA. So I know there is a conglomeration of different attendees here, some who are already on S/4HANA, on earlier versions, others who are still on ECC and are contemplating moving to S/4HANA. And then there are others that are even evaluating SAP. Of course, the S/4HANA version of it as an option as for an ERP solution to their business. So what I would like to do is open up a poll just very quickly to get all of you awake and attentive to ask you where you currently are in terms of your roadmap to S/4HANA. And if you are somebody that's evaluating S/4HANA, SAP from scratch, then you can also just answer evaluating in the poll that comes, because obviously you're not in the process of moving towards S/4HANA at this point. So I'm going to launch the poll, and I have Rihanna confirm that it is there. And you guys can, if you don't mind, start just entering your option in all of these questions. So it's just one option.
Yep, so the poll is visible, Lorraine, and we'll give everyone a minute to submit in their responses. And we'll show the results afterwards.
Okay. All right. So I think you have the results, Rihanna. I won't see the results here for some reason.
Yep, I'll pop them up, and we'll give everyone 30 more seconds. I do see the submissions coming in, and then we'll show the results. Okay. I think that's about everyone who's going to submit a response, so let's showcase the results. So Lorraine, right now, what we're looking at in terms of results, we have 24% of the audience has already deployed SAP S/4HANA or SAP S/4HANA Cloud. Right now, no one is currently implementing or going through the process right now. 6% of the audience is performing a pilot or POC, but the majority of our audience today are all currently evaluating SAP S/4HANA, and 24% are either have projects on hold or have no plans on moving yet.
Okay, perfect. So that's kind of the mixture that I was expecting. We will keep that in mind as we go through the process of talking about S/4HANA 2020 and also talking about the migration. So thanks very much to everyone for participating. I'm going to jump right into the webinar now. And we are recording it, so you will have the opportunity to view the recording at a later stage. And also in the handouts part of this particular presentation, you will see that you can actually download my presentation and a document that I will refer to as we go through this process. All right, so coming back to the presentation, we're talking about S4HANA 2020, but as you saw in the invitation, we really want to focus on the evolution of S4HANA. And the reason we want to focus on the evolution of S4HANA is we want to really look at what the tangible and relevant benefits are that have been added along the line from when it was first conceived. So because at the end of the day, it's a combination of all those benefits that are embedded into the 2020 version that we're showcasing today. After that, we can kind of look at the highlights of this evolution and decide why you should possibly choose SAP S4HANA as the solution that you go forward with. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions, or at least trigger some thoughts in your mind in terms of what that would be. And then we'll go through a business case for SAP S4HANA and how you, all of you actually, those that are looking at SAP for the first time, those that are looking at or have ECC and are looking at upgrading or migrating to S4, and those that are on older versions of S4, what are the questions that people are asking as they try to figure out a business case for SAP S4HANA. And then I'll end up with just a very brief introduction to an Illumity offering that we have called The Power of Next, which is really an offering to help you build this business case. So we have a whole bunch of tools that are Illumity tools mixed together with SAP tools that will enable you to actually go through this process of getting a good business case together. I have a couple of little demos in between, and I have a lot of references to documents where you can find details. You know, some of the pages, there's a document that I've included in the webinar summary that I just referred to. It's 704 pages of just capabilities in 2020 alone. So there's a ton of information out there, and what you really need to do is to strip that down to information that's relevant to your organization. And we're going to try and help you do that actually in subsequent webinars after this one, which is more of a general webinar, where we will focus on specific industries where we've pulled out the pertinent things, and we'll get into dialogue with yourselves on what really matters and what really would make a difference as you move to S4HANA. But for now, you know, I've tried to make it comprehensive, but it's a lot of stuff to cover, so we're going to just look for the highlights. All right, so the evolution of SAP S4HANA started in 2015, and we're looking particularly today just at the enterprise management solution, which is really the full-blown SAP system that includes both finance and logistics. Back in the early 2015, SAP came out with a thing called Simple Finance, which was really just an adaptation of ECC in the finance area only to leverage the power of the HANA in-memory database. And that kind of evolved a little bit, but then SAP launched later on in November of 2015 the real full-blown logistics and financial version of this animal that we're talking about today. And we'll move through from year to year, looking at the key highlights that have come along that have made S4HANA more and more compelling to our customers in terms of, you know, this system is starting to make more and more sense to me to be the solution that I want to adopt or move to. So if we look at 1511, just very quickly, you know, this was the first enterprise solution that actually followed Simple Finance. Simple Finance also had a small upgrade path to 1605. It no longer, of course, there's no longer just a finance version out there. The full-blown version has both logistics and finance in it. In finance, there were important things that came along was the Universal Journal, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the process. Really, the biggest thing was the simplification of all these structures and tables within S4HANA that SAP was able to achieve by having an in-memory database sitting underneath the application. And in being able to do that, they were able to eliminate, as most of you probably know, a lot of the aggregate and summary tables that were necessary in the past, and which most companies, most ERP vendors had to face in order to be able to provide reporting and analytics to the customers. A lot of ERP vendors like SAP actually encouraged BW or data warehouses as the way to get to your data in the past because of the complication of the data structures in the ERP itself. All of that started being eliminated with the introduction of S/4HANA 1511. So already at that point, we saw the simplification. And the Universal Journal on the finance side was really one table, essentially, that carried all of the attributes of every financial posting, bringing those attributes from the feeder lines of business. So if it was from materials management or sales and distribution, all of those attributes of those postings were collected in the Universal Journal and made available for analytics. The material ledger was introduced, so this was something that was optional in the ECC, in the later ECC versions. It became a part of the integral 1511 solution and really gave the capability to be able to track your inventory values in multiple currencies. And so it was a good step in the right direction. It just created capability that if you had multiple currencies, it was there for you to use. You could also do actual costing, and there were other components of the material ledger that became available to everybody to access. And then SAP also moved to the business partner, where customers, vendors, employees, any kind of partner relationship within the system were consolidated into this concept of business partner, so that you didn't have to repeat your master data and so on. On the logistics side, SAP introduced a really simplified materials resource planning platform, so an MRP platform that enabled people to really run MRP real time and efficiently instead of waiting for batch jobs and so on overnight. And this again, powered by the in-memory database. And then all other kinds of new capabilities were added into the different logistics modules, like in production planning, inventory management, and so on. And it started, as a subset in 1511, which grew in more and more in the other versions. And then one of the things that happened kind of alongside the S/4HANA roadmap was the introduction of a different user experience. And this was kind of independent to what was happening in HANA and in the HANA, the S/4HANA world. It was just something that kind of worked alongside and became adopted as the user experience in S/4HANA from here on going forward. And it really gave that ability to simplify some GUI transactions that were performing multiple tasks in one transaction with a zillion fields in it. SAP was using HTML5 and UI5 capabilities to break that down into transactions, simple transactions that were task-oriented. And so one by one, SAP was eliminating any kind of GUI transaction that kind of did 10 transactions for 10 different users within your organization, and hence accommodating all these fields into really to-the-point transactions. And these were the new Fiori transactions that were made available. And then more important than anything else is the analytics capability that came with the introduction of the HANA in-memory database and this Fiori capability that sat on top of it. And this is the ability to actually access your operational data real time and be able to build KPIs or metrics on your data that you could then put on a tile that could then help you manage by exception. So you could see where problems existed just by looking at a measurement on a tile and then being able to drill down and solve that problem. And within the drill down, SAP also created the capability of being able to act, to have some insight to action from the KPI that you were reading. So if there was a problem, you needed to address it by phoning a customer or sending a customer invoice or a customer statement, you could do that directly from the drill down in the analytics itself. So if we're to summarize 1511, the key components here that we saw made a difference was the simplified structures, of course, of the HANA, the capability of the HANA database. and then also this embedded analytics capability, which is pervasive all the way through to 2020 that we'll look at in a moment. And then the user experience, of course, all along. This was just an introduction into Fiori at this point, so you didn't have a full-blown Fiori launchpad available, but you could use Fiori transactions within a launchpad at this point in time. And then there were new and efficient business processes like we saw with MRP. These were included now also into this environment. Moving on to 1610, this was where SAP introduced this whole concept of saying, you know, we've had industry best practices for years. And in those industry best practices, we've done some customization within the SAP core to support those industries. But a lot of those things have become relevant across industry. And so if you're not in the oil and gas industry, you could leverage things like the inventory planning workbench, but you couldn't because you didn't implement the best practices for oil and gas. So SAP, because of the power of HANA, was able to start incorporating more and more of the industry stuff that you could only have if you were in that industry into the core so that everybody could leverage these capabilities if need be. So that's what we saw a lot happening in 1610 as a starting point for this. In here, you also see that on the finance side, the thing, I'm not going to read the entire slide and go into all the details, you'll get a copy of this. But one of the things I really liked, of course, being a finance person myself, is the PA, the profitability and analysis capabilities. With the Universal Journal, all the attributes that came from SD, MM, PP, all the other modules within SAP were available in the financial documents itself. And now you could actually report on profitability by any measure within your organization. On the S/4HANA logistics side, you know, the extended warehouse management became incorporated in the core as well. And SAP really worked really hard on improving the production planning process, making it more of a graphical view that included constraint-based planning. And that was something that was added as early as 1610 and has been evolving all the way to what I'll show you later on is the Production Planner Optimizer, which incorporates all of these components in 2020. And pervasive, as I said, through all of this is the Fiori alongside roadmap. So Fiori 2.0 was introduced in 1610. And this enabled us to be able to use Fiori on all different devices, and also gave us the ability to use a launchpad where we accessed everything in S/4HANA from a launchpad, whether it's an old GUI transaction or a new Fiori transaction or a really good analytics tile. We could do this all from one launchpad. And all along, you'll see on every slide, every version, every release, we get new Fiori applications created and added to the portfolio that SAP was developing. Why is that important? It's important because, especially on the analytics side, SAP was bringing in new business measures based on multiple industries that could then be leveraged out of the box to give you, that exception-based management that I spoke about before. So it was really transforming us from relying on Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables to run our business into a mindset where we had this ability to be able to see an exception and respond to that exception. One thing I'll add at this point too, that SAP included in these early versions of S/4HANA was the ability to build your own KPIs or your own business measures by putting your own calculations into the database. And this is particularly important for you when you look at the portfolio of Fiori apps that SAP has, or Fiori Analytics apps that SAP has. If you don't see an app that actually is most important to you, you can actually create these for yourself and enhance your own differentiation in the market because of the access to something that others probably don't get out of the box. So that's something to remember as we go through this process. So the highlights in 1610 was the full use of the Fiori Launchpad, the industry to core idea of bringing more and more capabilities into the S/4HANA environment out of all the industries that are out there. If we move to 1709 next, so now we're getting into the first time that SAP started incorporating or embedding machine learning capabilities within SAP S4HANA. So people were, a lot of people and a lot of our customers were thinking that, you know, this concept of machine learning and artificial intelligence was still a bit of science fiction back in 2017 even. And SAP started proving through these embedded Fiori applications that this capability is really available now. And some of the early versions of this, one example I gave here was cash applications. So really having that ability to get multiple payment advices or information from your customers in terms of what invoices they're paying you through a lockbox or through a check or through electronic funds transfer, and be able to clear those automatically. Now, you can do that already in SAP ECC, in the earlier versions of SAP ECC. But you always used to have a big fallout. So maybe they could happen successfully at, you know, in a 50 to 60% ratio, because your customers were pretty good in giving you all the invoices and the exact dollar amount to match them. But quite often there were disputes, there were reasons why the customer wouldn't pay certain amounts, and the accounting clerk would have to deal with that manually. So what SAP looked at machine learning for was to look at an accounting clerk and see how they are managing the application of cash over and over again, and what they do with money that's left over or money that's in deficit, and learned from that, and then made a proposal to the accounting clerks on how this cash can be applied automatically. And eventually, customers started getting used to the machine being actually quite smart and accepting these proposals automatically, so that the cash application could happen. But it was one of the first examples of really starting to let a machine think for you, instead of getting a programmer to code all the algorithms that you can think of. And of course, you always miss 100 of them. The machine actually learns them from watching what the accounting clerk does. So that was one of the big changes in 1709. This is when machine learning was launched into the S4HANA world. And then you can see additional industry to core, transportation management. So what you also see a lot of in the SAP world is that any solutions that stood outside of the core, like transportation management, outside of the core ECC, like extended warehouse management and so on, SAP was rebuilding that functionality into the core so that you could minimize your infrastructure and not need that extra layer of data redundancy. So this is what you see here, and this is something, again, that SAP has evolved and made better and better from release to release. SAP also saw needs for like variant configuration in most of our customers that are in manufacturing. They added an advanced component to that was very graphic, and this was included back in these days. And then some changes around project management, including commercial project management, which was also separated from the core in the past into the core, and then added project and portfolio management into the core as well. So just a couple of examples of things that happened. And as you can see, there were new Fiori apps added once again to augment some of the transactional changes that SAP created, and then a whole bunch of new analytical tiles as well. So if we're to summarize the 1709 improvements, we would look at the external to embedded. So the transportation management is one example of the start of this process that SAP was going through, and then the incorporation of machine learning. And this started becoming quite a revolutionary focus of SAP's from here on forward in the subsequent versions of S4HANA, because it really started becoming business as usual, machine learning, as opposed to something that we thought was science fiction at one point. So moving to 1809, here we are looking at more and more, as I said, expanded machine learning capabilities across all the lines of business. So this was incorporated into the logistics and financial sides of things. So I'll give you an example of some of these in a moment. On the finance side, central finance kind of was pervasive earlier on, but it really, at this point in 1809, SAP put a real focus on all the capabilities around central finance. And central finance really is an environment where you can create all of your financial activities within an S4 environment and connect real time through drill down to the details of any financial posting on multiple either SAP S4HANA or SAP ECC or non-SAP systems. So it was really enabling customers with the complex landscapes to actually consolidate all of their information into a central environment that had this added capability of enabling real-time connection into all of these databases, so that you could get that audit trail of a posting that started somewhere else. So super, super valuable for customers that were in that situation. And then also on a consolidation side, you probably all know the history of SAP and consolidations, starting with consolidations in ECC that was somewhat clunky, moving that out into BPC, business planning and consolidations, which was a standalone environment that either sat on Microsoft or on a BW or business warehouse environment, and then bringing it back into S4, and then finally realizing that this is something that SAP needed to focus on and really improve for customers looking to consolidate multiple entities across not only SAP systems, by the way, but also legacy or other systems that had financial data, and created what they called group reporting inside the core. So again, you're not needing that extra infrastructure of a Microsoft database or a business warehouse. You can actually do all of your consolidations within the core. So again, bringing a lot of stuff to the core, and more industry to core stuff happened. And then also alongside central finance was the concept of central procurement, because procurement and finance are very closely related, and having companies running central finance, the need for a central procurement environment became important as well. And that was released at this time. Another example of embedded solutions, service management, which sat in CRM, was embedded into the core at this point as well, and made available, and also improved a little bit from the initial version of it. And we also see new Fiori apps. One of the ones that I found interesting was sales order creation. Took a long time to appear as a new Fiori transaction in the SAP roadmap. It did make its appearance in 1809, and it's just one of the things I found interesting, because I thought that would be one of the first ones to come. But if anybody remembers creating sales orders, there's so many people that touch that process in the business world, that the transaction that SAP had in ECC was pretty complex. Complex in the sense that it was everything to everybody. So SAP has now created simplified versions of that. So if we look at the highlights of 1809, centralized functions like finance, central procurement, and then the group reporting to me was one of those things. Some of the embedded and industry to core were already a theme that SAP had started in earlier versions of S4HANA. So going to 1909 then, we're getting close to 2020. Here, even more automation and machine learning was made available. And I put a link here for those that are interested in going to explore what does SAP have in terms of some of these machine learning capabilities, and specifically looking at the robotic process automation processes that SAP has already built and embedded into the core. So just quickly going to go there. If I click on this link, and you'll be able to do this from my presentation as well, you can see here, this is the intelligent RPA store. And if you come in here, you can just click on Explore the Store, and you will see a list of all the robotic process automation scripts that SAP has made available. And if you want to look at it specifically for on-prem, since we're talking about 2020 today, you can actually click on the edition here, click on on-premise, and then you'll be able to see all of those kinds of things. So there's a whole bunch of different automations that are available now, not using ABAP programming that we might have used in the past, but really using an emerging technology that kind of combines machine learning with this automation, robotic process automation process that we're talking about. So you feel free to come and browse around in here. When you click on it, it gives you some details and tells you what packages you would need to upload and or get access to be able to actually use these within your environment. All right, so coming back to my presentation. So that's one thing. On the financial side, SAP also introduced a planning solution. It had toyed a little bit with the CO planning, the controlling planning that already existed in ECC within the S4 environment, but really realized with its customers, of course, that you need far more advanced planning capabilities with things like some predictive components embedded in it. And so the SAP Analytics Cloud became really the planning engine that talked real time to the data in SAP S4HANA and was able to then enable planning at a much deeper, more complex, but streamlined ability within the SAP Analytics Cloud. One of the things for people running MRP that you might be interested in is looking at the predictive MRP capabilities that were made available in 1909 and of course are also available in 2020 that really start looking at past data, looking at data that's not yet converted and making a prediction of your requirements. So that's something that is also now available. Also, one of the things I wanted to highlight here was the flexible workflow. So the workflow engine in SAP ECC has evolved tremendously now into a really very user-driven workflow engine where you can actually set up your own workflows within your organization without needing a programmer or a developer to come in and assist. That will enable you to then set up all the levels you want, all the criteria you want under which you want this workflow to kick in, and then activate it for a period of time or activate it for infinity, depending on your choice. But these things, this flexible workflow, and that's kind of how it's called now in the S4HANA world, is really something that we've seen being leveraged a lot by our customers. So summarizing 1909, what you're probably starting to see now as I'm talking about the evolution of S4 is that a lot of these innovation in these later versions are not so much the adaptation of ECC anymore to the HANA database and getting, moving from an ECC older technology to the newer technology of HANA. It's now starting to get beyond that. ECC is fully converted into S4HANA now. It's fully enabled, but now SAP is starting to focus on, I guess the shiny objects, if you like, but the more cooler capabilities that can really differentiate you and help you, in your digital transformation roadmap to get to somewhere else within your organization. So that's why automation, intelligent RPA is one of the key highlights I thought were pertinent in this solution. And then the predictive MRP, leveraging machine learning and predictive capabilities to make that available. If we move into 2020, so we finally land on 2020. It's a subset, 2020, so if we're introducing 2020, it's everything that you've just seen, plus additional capabilities, right? So what are the additional capabilities? So if you, oops, sorry, my mouse is oversensitive. One of the things I did connect to here was the innovations that are available. So this is the PDF that we already added into the presentation itself. It's 704 pages, so you have to be patient and let it open up. But it actually walks you through all the capabilities of the 2020 version. So this is not only the new stuff, this includes everything that 2020 encompasses. So it's this roadmap that I talked about, plus the new stuff. This is a version of the simplification document for those who are familiar with that document that has been fine-tuned for 2020 by SAP. So that's the one thing. Another thing that SAP included in 2020, it actually started in 1909 already, but it really came to maturity in 2020, is the concept of situation handling. Situation handling is really the ability to get the system to tell you when you're having a problem in any of your business processes within the system. So it's not the same as workflow, where you define in workflow, if under these circumstances, I want you to send a notification to somebody. This is really looking at processes and based on criteria that you set up, notifying people that there is an issue with that particular business process. So I must watch my time. I'm probably not going to have any time for any of your questions, but please put them in the chat, because we will go there and we will give you email answers to everything after the presentation. But I do want to show you a quick demo, so I'm just going to click on this very quickly. This logs me into SAP S/4HANA 2020, and I'm going in as a cash manager, and I want to just show you quickly how we're going to manage some payment advices. So I'm getting payment advices. Payment advices are those little PDF forms or Excel spreadsheets that you get from your customers saying, I've just sent you a check for $1 million, and these are the invoices that I'm paying with those. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to import one of these documents from my customer into my company code of choice. I'm going to add a file, so I saved the file that they sent me into a situation handling file, which is a PDF, by the way. So the system, this particular application is going to read that PDF and convert it into a readable data, and I'm going to process that. So now what it's doing is it's taking that PDF document and putting it into my system. So and at the same time, it's looking at all the invoices that were listed in this document, and it's matching all of those invoices to the invoices that exist for the customer that was on that PDF. So it recognized who the customer was, and it listed out all of those applications, all of those invoices, and now it's searching the system to find and match all of those invoices. Now that conversation that I just had with you is typically long enough to get it to do all of this matching. Yeah. So now it goes into a pending file. So it doesn't just post it in my system without me looking at it, because I'm still a little suspicious of these machine learning things. So I want to go and look at the document that was just posted into my system. So I can see it's 88,500 euros. And if I click into that, I get all the details around this payment advice. So here we can see these items were on the payment advice. I can actually see the document, the PDF document that I just uploaded with all of these amounts in there. No discounts were taken, so that's good. And I can, and the customer was already chosen, so I can actually just select it there. And I can now go in and confirm that I want to match this $88,000 to these invoices, because it looks right to me. So I'm going to go in and match that. So now it will go in and actually do the matching within the system. But what it notices is that the invoice list that I was given by the customer actually excluded one of the invoices. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a number 18003 that actually did not exist in that list. Now, the customer might on purpose not decided he's not going to pay the 90,000 euros of this invoice at this point in time. But it is something I need to evaluate further. So I get a notification, obviously in the run itself, I get the notification. But if this is being sent to someone else, they will get a notification in this little icon on the top right of their Fiori Launchpad telling them that invoices have been skipped. And they can actually click on this, and it will bring them back to the screen we just saw, that will enable them to evaluate what's going on. So I clicked on that notification and it told me, hey, this particular document has been missed by your customer. So what are you going to do about it? So what I did is I copied the document number. I click on the customer down here, and I'm going to go and process receivables. Insight to action. I'm now going to you go into the customer record here and see all of their entries and figure out what's going on with this particular invoice. So I'm going to click on the journal entry here, click on the filter button, and I'm actually going to put that invoice in there and say, okay. So now it's going to find the invoice in that list. There it is. And I can see that he has not paid this. So at this point in time, I can now, from my receivables process within S4HANA, I can go and contact the customer. I can create a promise to pay or a dispute case, or create a note just after I've called the customer and we've kind of resolved the issue. But all of that is happening within this environment. So that's situation handling, and this actually is available across the system in multiple different business processes. If you want to find out more of which business processes are available and how this works, I have 2 links in here. Don't just tell me there's a problem, help me solve the problem. It's a really nice blog on what situation handling does, and there is an overview here as well. On the finance side, oops, sorry, again, my mouse. There is a blog from this particular individual from SAP that covers all of the innovations in 2020. What I really liked about this blog that I think you would like as well is there are actual videos that go into the details around each of these items. So for billing and revenue innovation, you can actually watch a video by clicking on this link here, and it will take you through the actual screens and the process and improvements that come in billing and revenue within the finance module. Some new capabilities in receivables management, in central finance, in group reporting. Group reporting is really, really matured, and in 2020, it's a great consolidation solution. I know I'm promoting it because I love SAP, but I want you to go look at it for yourself. Treasury management improvements, and then of course the planning process that we talked about earlier involving the analytics cloud, as I mentioned. So these are, and also there's a nice universal allocation capability across multiple entities that's available now and working really well in S4 2020 that you can go and look at. So a really nice blog for those of you who have time. Else you can call me and we can sit and go through these together. But these are things that are included in 2020. And then on this page, I kind of highlighted some of the changes on the manufacturing side. So really some amazing stuff. There's one in quality management on supplier problem solving. There's a 8-step process for involving in a manufacturing process communication between buyers and suppliers, and this is an industry standard actually, and SAP has built the solution integrated into SAP S4HANA. And maybe for 1 second, if you do go look at that particular solution, and by the way, you can find this in this particular blog that has the highlights and screenshots of all of these solutions available for you to go and explore. If you do go and look at this in more detail, one of the things you'll notice that this particular application uses S4HANA as the core where all the transactions happen, but it also has an interaction with the SAP Cloud Platform, now known as the Business Technology Platform, where it actually does some processing involving some machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities to feed back information into the S4HANA core. So this is a great example of the integration and the capabilities that the core has together with the cloud platform. So the cloud platform has a lot of applications, industry-specific applications that are not in the core specifically, because these are really enhancements that use services like machine learning that make the system run better, but fully and seamlessly integrated. So something maybe you could go and have a look at when you have some time. But this particular blog, I think you would, I wanted to include this for especially for people focused more on manufacturing, because it really is an end-to-end, you can see it's a hell of a long blog, covering all of these components that I was talking about. You can actually click on the ones that are of interest to you, and then you can get, if you really like a video, by a very, very expressive SAP presenter. So I'm being facetious. He wasn't that expressive. Anyway, so that's something that I think you would enjoy and should spend some time on. So that the highlights of 2020 then included the, oh, I didn't even mention, that was on my previous slide. Let me just go back there quickly. The embedded dashboard. So the SAP Analytics Cloud, as you know, is a cloud solution. S4HANA on-premise has the capabilities of the Analytics Cloud now embedded in the solution, where your users can build stories and make them available as dashboards within the core itself. Now that in itself is something I think you will really enjoy, and it's a really cool capability. So I've included that as one of the major highlights of 2020. It was included in S4HANA Cloud some time ago, but now it's available on-prem. Situation handling was the other one that I showed you. So if we quickly look at why should you choose SAP S4HANA, and we take the highlights from the roadmap, simplified structures, so easier reporting, as a result, analytics and KPIs available, a user experience that's improved and easier to use, new and more efficient business processes. All of that came with 15.11 already. 16.10, the launch of the Fiori Launchpad, industry to core becoming more and more pervasive throughout the S4HANA solutions. External to embedded, not having that complex infrastructure, but having everything in the core. Incorporating machine learning capabilities within the core. Centralizing some functions for customers that have more complex infrastructures. Consolidating now in the core instead of going to Hyperion or going to BPC. And then automation stepping up its game a little bit across all lines of business, including predictive MRP. And then finally, the embedded SAC Analytics Cloud dashboarding capability that you have in 2020, and this new situation handling capability that we see. So these are just the highlights, right? Like if you go through the 704 pages, you'll probably find things that are even more relevant in your world. But what we see here is that user experience all through all of these processes, getting it better and better in every version of S4HANA. And then what's most important, and I think the most compelling reason, I think, for moving to S4HANA is that the underlying technology is new and it's evolving. It's this in-memory database that we talked about before. If you're still running on ECC and saying, you know what, it does what it needs to do for my business, you might be right today. I don't think you're going to be right tomorrow or in a month or half a year from now, or at least in a year from now, because technology doesn't stay still. And the technology that the NetWeaver technology that you have your ECC environment on has evolved. And the only way to get to use this and incorporate all of these things is to get to move to S4HANA. All right, so what I wanted to end off with is a couple of slides just talking about building your business case. I think this is pretty important. SAP Insider did a research and a survey actually on a bunch of customers in the middle of last year to figure out, you know, what are the drivers that customers are seeing for moving forward to SAP S4HANA. So the drivers were, you know, people talking about digital transformation and starting to focus more and more on that. And I think COVID really helped people, it helped, like that's a terrible word to use in the same sentence as COVID, but it really did bring awareness to the fact that we need to move and leverage, you know, digital capabilities in order to cope with things like a pandemic, right? So I think a lot of people started seeing a focus on digital transformation. Also, people saw that the cost of maintaining, you know, older technologies is starting to ramp up. So 31% of people are realizing they need to upgrade those technologies, and those technologies are not upgradable sometimes. and they're finding themselves in a predicament. And then, of course, the 2027 end of maintenance deadline that SAP has been advertising and has stuck to now for a year, I think, is something, of course, that's also people are saying, well, you know what, we should just get going on this now because we're going to be caught in a funnel, and we're not going to be able to move forward, and we're going to have to end up paying additional maintenance fees or getting out of maintenance eventually. So these were the main drivers that were identified. The actions that people felt they should take was, firstly, we need to understand how SAP S/4HANA will affect the business processes and the KPIs of my business. So, you know, help me understand. I hope today I helped a little bit because I was very high level, probably not as in depth as you need to, but that was one of the things 61% of customers were saying is very important to move forward. Now, of course, the costs, so everybody wants to understand and define the costs for moving to SAP S/4HANA, examining, you know, should we go stay private or on-prem, or should we go private cloud, or should we go public cloud, or should we have some kind of a hybrid environment? These are things that these are actions that you have to take in order to move forward. And then finally, you know, change management is something that you're going to have to address as you move forward. And hopefully the change management is going to be a positive change because you're improving user experiences. But, you know, even if you improve user experiences, people still don't like change. So it is something that has to, an action that you have to take going forward. The requirements on your side in terms of people, processes, and capabilities is that you need a strong relationship between your IT, who's going to say, we want the cool and shiny things, and the business, who really need those things, and bring them together to make sure that you have the IT and business aligned as to which of those things are the right things for the business. So that's important, and that's high on the list of requirements. People are concerned about extensibility, and I can do a whole webinar just on extensibility with you. And now that I have, 7 minutes left, we won't do that today. But you know, can moving to S4 still help me keep the custom requirements that I have? And the answer is yes, but we need to talk about it more with each individual company to understand how that is handled. And then also, you know, we want our financial data centralized. A lot of people want to bring all of that together. They want a return of investment calculation for doing this move, and they want to do any kind of delta analysis, right? So these are requirements that have to happen in order for us to be able to move forward. And then finally, just looking at technologies, what are the technologies? So when you're exploring this, we talked about actions is understanding how SAP S/4HANA is going to make your business better. But what are the underlying technologies that are required in order for us to fulfill our business requirements, the drivers of our business? And I just listed a bunch of things based on the survey that came highest on the list. So the highest on the list was improved user experience. And I think a lot of finance people answered the survey, and they all said, we want to close better. Give us a better closing cockpit. And then if you go down here, you see some of the other requirements. And there's a whole list, right? This is just looking at the top above 70% requirements or technologies that were needed. So what can Illumity do? So in my last 5 minutes, I will just give you a taste of how we can help you move forward. And we have a couple of follow-on webinars to kind of dig deeper into the value of S/4HANA at the industry level. We also have webinars coming up that are going to talk about our Power of Next approach to help you build your business case. But one of the most important parts of this process, I believe, is our change matrix discussion. In other words, determining the reasons for change. And we love to have this discussion because there are positives of not changing. And there are positives of changing, but there are also negatives of both. And what you really have to weigh up after we do this exercise with you is what is the most impactful to your business. And if you get to a conclusion that you shouldn't change, then don't change. That's probably unlikely, but it is a legitimate outcome of this exercise. So just being able to go through this to brainstorm, and this is not even SAP, oriented. It's just talking about your business and what you think needs to change, and what you fear if you should change, and what you could actually benefit from, or what you could carry forward in the current environment if you should change. This is a process that we like to do. So this is a workshop, and we analyze the results together with you, and then we can move on to the next step of our process. And the next step of our process consists of a bunch of steps that involve us really discovering your business, enabling us to actually job shadow in many cases to see how you're doing things today. It's a real assessment of how you're getting value out of your environment, whether it's legacy, whether it's ECC or an older version of S4HANA. That job shadowing really gives us an indication of where things could be better. And with our knowledge of what's out there, we can help you get there. And then we also do an art of the possible at the end of that discovery. Based on what we feel your requirements are, we will take those, the cool things, the shiny things, the really needed things, and we would present that to you and say, this is what you could gain, this is what you could leverage, and help you build a roadmap to move forward. And at the end of the day, you can put all of this through a value lifecycle management tool that will give you some real numbers in terms of the return on investment for this process. But I really literally took up almost the entire hour. I knew this might happen because I had so much to cover in 1 hour, but I hope that this at least triggered some thoughts in your mind, and that we can answer those questions subsequently. So we had one more poll that we wanted to do really right now. I have a couple of minutes to do this. And the second poll I'm going to launch here very quickly is, what is your status on building a business case? So where do you stand today? And I'm going to launch this on the screen. If you could answer that and leave that with us, this would be very interesting for us to look at and see. Obviously we're not going to pester you, but you can reach out to us to help you move to the next level. So if you don't mind giving that a bash, that would be great. And I would then hand over to Rihanna to conclude the call. Thanks, Rihanna.
Yeah. Thank you, Lorraine, for today's presentation. While everyone is filling out that last polling question, I do want to remind everyone that there are handouts available which will contain a copy of today's presentation deck, along with with one of the PDFs that were included that Lorraine mentioned in today's presentation. Like we mentioned before, please send in any questions you have about SAP S4HANA in general, or any of our or anything related to the upcoming release. Besides that, I'll give everyone a few more seconds to submit in their response to this last poll. I want to also hope that everyone has a lovely afternoon as well. So let's see the results. I'm just going to close this out, Lorraine.
Okay.
Okie dokes. So the results that we have so far is 7% of our audience has already completed their business case. 40% are currently performing an analysis or an early fact finding, which is great to hear. 7% have their business case on hold or pending approval for it. But 47%, the majority of our audience, have not started yet or do not plan to do a business case.
Okay, perfect. So that's really interesting. So there's lots of opportunity now, and I hope that I've inspired you to go and think about it. So thanks to everyone for joining and for listening to me for an hour. I hope I kept you entertained.
Mm-hmm. And please stay tuned to any further webinars being conducted by Illumity on SAP S4HANA. With that, I'll close out for today and hope that everyone has a lovely day. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.